Sold by her family, she was taken to the Count's mansion to serve the man she'd learned to love. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The drought had turned the Alentejo fields into a vast sheet of dust. Each morning, the wind carried the sound of cracking soil, as if the land itself complained of hunger. Inés Duarte crossed the yard with a bucket of water balanced against her hip. Her dress clung to her skin. Her father's voice came from inside the house, low, tense, and strange. She paused by the doorway. "You can't mean it," her mother whispered. "She's our child." "I have no other choice," he said. "The harvest failed. The debt collector returns tomorrow. If I refuse again, he'll take the house." Inés pressed her back to the wall. A chair scraped. Then her father added, "The Count of Montemor needs another servant. He'll forgive what I owe in exchange for her service." Her mother began to cry softly. Inés didn't move. Her throat went dry. The bucket slipped from her hands and hit the ground with a hollow sound. Both parents turned. Her father's face was pale and old under the weak lamplight. "You were not meant to hear that." "Then tell me it isn't true," she said. He couldn't. Her mother came closer, taking her hands. "It's only for a time. When the fields recover—" "They never will," he interrupted. "You know they won't." Inés stepped back. "You're selling me." Her father's lips tightened. "I'm saving what's left of us." She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The neighbors had nothing. The church had less. Even the riverbed near the mill had gone dry. That night, she sat awake beside her younger brother, who slept without knowing anything. Her mother prepared a small bundle, a dress, a shawl, a comb. Nothing more. The sound of insects filled the dark. When dawn broke, a carriage waited outside the gate. It was black and heavy, its wheels already thick with dust. The driver wore the Count's colors and avoided her eyes. Her mother kissed her forehead. "Be respectful, Inés. Work hard. Write if they allow you." Her father only nodded once. "This is the only way." Inés climbed inside without looking back. The road wound through empty fields. Hours passed in silence. She tried to count the turns to keep her mind busy, but soon lost track. Each jolt of the carriage made her heart jump. The driver spoke suddenly. "You're lucky, girl. The Count feeds his people well." She looked up. "You know him?" "Not well. No one does. He doesn't talk much. Keeps to himself." "Why does he need another servant?" He shrugged. "Ask the housekeeper. I just drive." They passed through a small village. Children stopped playing to stare at the carriage. Women at the fountain whispered and crossed themselves. By afternoon, clouds gathered but gave no rain. The hills grew steeper, and vineyards appeared, dry vines curling around empty posts. A flock of birds startled as they entered a long avenue lined with cypress trees. At the end stood the mansion. Montemor Manor rose grey against the pale sky, its shutters closed, its gardens overgrown. The driver opened the door. "This is it." Inés stepped down. The air smelled faintly of smoke and lavender. A woman waited on the steps, a tall figure in black with a chain of keys at her waist. "You are the new maid?" she asked. "Yes, señora." "Dona Branca," the woman said, turning toward the door. "Follow me. Speak little. Work well. The Count dislikes noise." Inside, the air was cool and dim. Inés caught glimpses of marble floors, tall windows, and portraits darkened by age. Every sound seemed too loud. Dona Branca led her through a narrow corridor to a small room near the servants' quarters. "You will sleep here. Supper is at sunset. Wake before dawn. There is much to do." "Yes, señora." As soon as the door closed, Inés sat on the narrow bed. The walls were bare. A single candle flickered on the table. She opened her bundle and placed her few things inside a wooden drawer. From somewhere above came a faint echo. Slow footsteps crossing a floor, then silence. At supper, the servants spoke in low voices. An older woman whispered, "He hasn't left the study in 2 days." A boy polishing silver nodded. "He walks the halls at night. Always alone." Inés listened without comment. Donna Branca served the soup. You'll begin in the East Wing tomorrow. No questions, no wandering. After eating, Inez returned to her room. She tried to pray but couldn't find the words. The candle burned low, then came the sound again. Footsteps above her ceiling, steady, unhurried. She held her breath. The door to her room creaked. She turned sharply. A tall man stood there, framed by the dim light of the corridor. His hair was dark, his expression unreadable. He carried a candle that cast shadows across his face. Inez rose quickly. "My lord?" He didn't answer. His gaze moved from her face to the small bundle on the table, then back to her eyes. "I am your new maid," she said softly. "I know." His voice was deep, calm, distant. He studied her another moment. "What is your name?" he asked. "Inez Duarte, my lord." A faint flicker crossed his face, something like surprise or recognition, but it vanished at once. "You'll find this house quiet," he said.
"Keep it that way." "Yes, my lord." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Do not fear the silence. It keeps company better than words." She didn't know what to reply. He disappeared into the corridor, and his footsteps faded. When she finally lay down, sleep did not come easily. The candle had burned out, but the moonlight entered through the small window, silvering the floor. Hours passed. Somewhere in the distance, a door opened with a soft creak. Inez listened.
The sound came again, measured steps along the corridor. She rose quietly and went to the window. The courtyard below was empty, the fountain dry. Then she looked up, toward the upper balcony. A figure stood there, still as a statue, watching her from the shadows. It was the Count. Morning came gray and cool. The courtyard was still wet with dew when Inez stepped outside carrying a basket of linens. She tried not to look up at the balcony where the Count had stood the night before. Maybe she had imagined him. Maybe the light had deceived her. Donna Branca's voice cut through the quiet. "Move faster, girl. The East Wing must be ready before noon." "Yes, senora." The East Wing was a long corridor lined with tall doors. The air smelled faintly of dust and candle wax. Inez scrubbed, swept, polished until her hands ached. The other servants passed in silence. Only one, a small boy who carried firewood, dared to speak to her. "Don't go near the west side," he whispered. "Nobody goes there." "Why not?" she asked. He looked around before answering. "The Count doesn't allow it. It's where she lived." "She?" "The Countess," he said, lowering his voice. "She died there." Donna Branca appeared behind them. "What are you two murmuring about?" "Nothing, senora," Inez said quickly. The boy ran off, and the housekeeper glared. "You'll do better to keep to your work. Curiosity is poison in this house." "Yes, senora." By afternoon, the heat grew heavy. Inez went to the kitchen to fetch water. The older servants talked in murmurs. "They say he still keeps her rooms untouched," one woman said. "Don't speak of it," another warned. "The last girl who tried to look inside was sent away before dawn." Inez felt a chill. She carried the bucket back to her room, but the thought stayed with her. Why would the Count preserve a part of the house like a tomb? That night, she dreamt of footsteps and a door that opened by itself. The next morning, while sweeping the main hall, she noticed a thin layer of dust near a side door. It was carved differently from the rest, less polished, almost forgotten. The keyhole was rusty. She bent down and saw faint light on the other side, sunlight flickering over something gold. She shouldn't look. Donna Branca's warning echoed in her head, yet her hand moved toward the handle. The door creaked softly and gave way. Inside was a corridor thick with silence. The windows were covered with white sheets that glowed like ghosts in the dim light. Dust motes floated in the air. She stepped inside. On a small table lay a vase with dried roses. Above it hung a portrait, a woman in a pale dress, her expression serene, her eyes dark. Inez froze. The face in the painting looked like hers. A cold wave passed through her. She wanted to step closer, to see if it was real, but a sharp voice behind her stopped her. "What are you doing here?" She turned. Donna Branca stood in the doorway, her face rigid. Out!" the housekeeper snapped. "Now!" Ines obeyed. Her heart raced as she crossed the threshold. The door slammed behind her. The housekeeper's eyes were fierce. "You were told never to enter this wing." "I didn't mean to—" "Do not lie. You meant to look. They all do." She paused, lowering her voice. "If the Count finds out, you'll regret it." "I'm sorry, Senora." "Go back to your work. Say nothing to anyone." Inez nodded, but the image of the portrait burned in her mind. At supper, the servants were unusually quiet. The Count's place at the head of the table remained empty. Only the sound of spoons touched the air. Later, when she returned to her room, she found her door slightly open. Inside, the candle on her table had been lit, though she hadn't left it that way. She stepped in carefully. A folded handkerchief lay on her pillow, embroidered with the initials AM. She held it for a moment, unsure whether to be frightened or grateful. The next morning, she woke before dawn to the sound of footsteps in the corridor. When she opened her door, she saw the Count walking toward the main staircase. He stopped when he saw her. "You rise early," he said. "I was on my way to the kitchen, my lord." He looked at her for a moment. "The servants say you work hard." "Thank you, my lord." His gaze drifted toward the corridor behind her. "You went into the West Wing yesterday." She froze. "I only stepped inside for a moment. I didn't mean any harm." He studied her face. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing in old houses." "Yes, my lord." His tone softened slightly. "Did you see her portrait?" She hesitated. "Yes." He turned away. "Then you understand why that part of the house remains closed." "I don't," she said quietly. She was beautiful. He glanced back at her, surprised by her courage. Beauty is not always kind. Some memories are better left untouched. He walked away before she could answer. For days afterward he avoided her. The house seemed heavier, the air thicker. The servants spoke less. Inés buried herself in work, but the thought of the portrait never left her. One afternoon, rain began to fall for the first time in months. She stood by a window, watching drops hit the dry earth. The Count's voice startled her. "You miss your home?" She turned. He stood near the doorway, his coat unbuttoned, his expression unreadable. "Yes, my lord, but it feels far away now. Distance can be a mercy," he said, "when one cannot return." "You could leave this house if you wished," she said. He smiled faintly. "And go where? A man cannot run from himself." She didn't know what to say. He moved closer, his gaze drawn to the rain outside. "I used to think storms would wash the past away," he said. "They never do." She watched him silently. There was something fragile about him, like glass held too tightly. When he turned toward her, his voice changed. "Do you fear me, Inés?" "No, my lord." "You should. I don't think you want anyone to fear you." He looked at her for a long time before leaving the room. That night, thunder shook the windows. The servants gathered in the kitchen, crossing themselves whenever lightning flashed. Inés helped close the shutters. Dona Branca muttered, "The Lord spare us." Storms never bring peace to this house. When the others went to their rooms, Inés stayed behind to tidy the dishes. The wind howled down the chimney, making the lamps flicker. She heard a sound upstairs, something breaking, like glass. She hurried to the staircase. At the top, a faint light glowed from the forbidden corridor. The west wing door stood open. She hesitated, then stepped forward. Rain lashed against the tall windows as she entered. The corridor was darker than before. Water dripped from a crack in the ceiling. At the far end, the light came from a single candle set on the floor. The Count was there, standing before the torn portrait. The canvas hung half from its frame, ripped through the face of the woman who looked like Inés. His shoulders were tense, his hands covered with dust and paint. "My lord," she whispered. He turned slowly. His expression was unreadable, his eyes hollow. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I heard something break. It doesn't matter." He looked back at the ruined painting. "She's gone, yet the house keeps her." "You loved her," Inés said before she could stop herself. He didn't answer. His silence was enough. "The portrait," she murmured. "Why destroy it?" "Because she doesn't belong here anymore." The wind blew the candle flame sideways, throwing shadows over his face. He took a step toward her. "You shouldn't have come," he said again. "I'm sorry." He stood very still. For a moment, it seemed he would say something more, but instead, he turned his back and faced the torn canvas. "Go," he said quietly. Inez stepped backward, the rain roaring above the roof. She looked once more at the painting, at the face that could have been her own. "My lord," she said softly. "Who was she to you?" He didn't turn. "Everything, and nothing that remains." The candle flickered out. Darkness filled the corridor. When the next flash of lightning came, she saw his outline against the broken frame, still, silent, alone. She turned to leave, but the door had swung shut behind her. The handle was cold in her hand. From behind, his voice came low and strange. "She looked like you." Inez froze. Her breath caught. The rain pounded harder. "She looked like you," he said again, almost to himself, as if speaking to a ghost. The storm passed, but its memory lingered. The next morning, the mansion smelled of damp wood and smoke from the fireplaces that had burned all night. Inez worked in silence. The servants avoided her eyes. They seemed to know she had been where no one was allowed. Dona Branca's disapproval hung over every corridor like a shadow. In the garden, the rain had revived the ground. Puddles glimmered under the weak sun. Inez knelt to tie the vines that had fallen. Her thoughts returned again and again to the Count's words. She looked like the woman in the painting. The Count appeared suddenly on the path. He stopped a few steps away, watching her hands move over the wet earth. "You were not meant to be in that corridor," he said. "I'm sorry, my lord. I was worried when I heard the sound." He studied her face. "You must learn not to worry about what doesn't concern you." "I'll try." He looked at the vines she had tied. "You saved them from dying." "I thought they were lost. They only needed water, my lord." He seemed to want to say something more, but instead he nodded and walked back toward the house. That small exchange stayed with her. Over the following days, his distance softened. He began appearing where she worked, sometimes only to watch. When she curtsied, he would give a short nod, almost like a greeting. Once, while she carried clean linens upstairs, he took one end of the basket from her. "You shouldn't carry this alone," he said. She blinked at him. "It's my duty." "Even duty can break a person," he replied, setting the basket down gently. The servants noticed. Whispers filled the kitchen. "He speaks to her," one said. "He never speaks to anyone," another answered. Dona Branca silenced them. "Mind your tasks. The Count owes explanations to no one." Inez tried to ignore the talk, but it grew louder every day. Still, she could not deny how her heart changed when she saw him. The fear she once felt had become something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or something warmer. One afternoon, she was dusting the shelves in the library when she heard his footsteps behind her. "You enjoy this room," he said. "It's quiet here," she answered. He nodded. "Books keep secrets better than people." He looked over the rows of leather spines. "Do you read?" "A little, my lord. My brother taught me." He smiled faintly. "Then you're fortunate. Words are safer than memories." She hesitated, then asked, "Was the Countess fond of reading?" His expression changed. "She was." "I didn't mean to." "It's all right," he interrupted. "You remind me of her. That's not your fault." Her pulse quickened. "Why do I remind you of her?" "She was kind to everyone, even when it cost her." He turned to the window. "Kindness can be a dangerous gift." She wanted to ask what he meant, but the look on his face stopped her. That night she couldn't sleep. The wind had grown gentle, carrying the smell of wet soil. In the corridor she heard soft steps, slower than before. She rose, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and opened the door. The Count stood there, holding a candle. "Did I wake you?" "No, my lord. I was walking. The house feels different after the rain." "Yes, it feels alive again." He studied her face. "You don't fear this place anymore." "I did at first, not now." "Why?" "Because it isn't cruel, only lonely." He lowered the candle slightly. "Loneliness can make cruelty." "Maybe. But it can also make kindness." He gave a short, almost weary laugh. "You think you understand too much." "Maybe I do," she said softly. For a moment they stood in silence, the flame trembling between them. Then he said, "You should sleep." He turned to leave, but she spoke again. "Why did you destroy the portrait?" He froze. "Because she was no longer mine to keep." "Do you still love her?" He didn't answer. The candlelight flickered over his profile. "Good night, Inez." When he left, she leaned against the door, her heart beating fast. Days turned into weeks. His manner changed, less formal, almost gentle. He began to eat with the servants, claiming the silence of his study wearied him. The household grew livelier, laughter returned, cautious at first. The Count listened when Inez spoke, sometimes even smiled at her remarks. One evening, while she was folding linens, he entered the room. "I've received a letter from Lisbon," he said. "They're asking for help with the vineyards there. I may travel. For long, my lord. A fortnight, perhaps more." She felt an unexpected weight in her chest. "Then we'll keep the house well until your return." He watched her carefully. "Would you miss me?" She looked down. "It would feel emptier without you." His eyes softened. "I thought so too." He reached out, then stopped himself. "Forgive me. I've forgotten what should and shouldn't be said." She shook her head. "There's nothing to forgive." He left the next morning before sunrise. The carriage wheels echoed down the avenue until all was silent again. The days without him stretched long. The servants returned to their quiet habits. Inez did her work with precision, but no joy. She found herself walking through the garden each evening, listening for a sound that never came. One afternoon, while cleaning the library, she moved a heavy chair and noticed a panel in the wall slightly loose. Behind it was a narrow, hollow space filled with dust. She reached inside and drew out a small bundle tied with ribbon. Inside were folded papers, letters, some yellowed with age. The first bore her family's crest. Her breath caught. She recognized her father's handwriting. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Then she hid the letters under her apron and slipped back to her room. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. The letter was short. It spoke of debt, of gratitude owed to the Count for favors done long ago, and of an arrangement made to settle what could never be repaid. "Our daughter Inez," her father had written, "will serve in your house as proof of our good faith and remembrance of the past promise between our families." She read it twice, unable to breathe. What promise? What could her family owe him beyond money? She opened the next page, a second letter in the same hand. It mentioned her mother, Ana Duarte, who had once worked for the Count's household in her youth, before marrying her father. There were words of sorrow, of a promise the Count had made to care for the woman's family if ever they fell into need. Inez sat motionless. Her mother had spoken little of her youth, only that she once served a noble house. Could it have been this one? The door creaked. She stuffed the letters under the pillow. Donna Branca stood in the doorway. "What are you hiding?" "Nothing, Senora." The housekeeper's eyes narrowed. "The Count will not like lies. I swear it's nothing wrong." Donna Branca studied her a moment longer. "Keep your secrets then. But remember, this house hears everything." She left, closing the door harder than necessary. Inez waited until her footsteps faded, before taking the letters again. Her hands trembled as she folded them carefully back into their ribbon. That evening, the Count's carriage returned earlier than expected. The servants hurried to prepare supper. When he entered, the hall filled with the scent of rain and travel. His gaze found Inez almost immediately. "I didn't expect you tonight, my lord," she said. "The vineyards in Lisbon can survive without me a little longer," he replied. The servants withdrew, leaving them alone in the hall. "You look troubled," he said. "I'm tired," she lied. He didn't believe her. "Something happened while I was gone." "No, my lord." He stepped closer. "Your voice tells another story." She forced a smile. "The work never ends. That's all." He studied her face. "Then rest. You've done enough for one day." But she could not rest. That night she lit her candle and read the letters again, each word heavier than before. The promise, her mother's name, the sense that she was here for a reason far beyond a servant's duty, it all pressed upon her. The next morning she met him in the library. The rain had started again, soft against the windows. "My lord," she said, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did you know my mother?" The question caught him off guard. "Why do you ask that?" "Because her name was Ana Duarte. She once worked for a noble house, and my father's letter..." She stopped herself, realizing too late what she had revealed. His expression hardened. "You've been reading something that was not meant for you. It was hidden in your wall." He turned away. "Some doors should stay closed. I have the right to know why I'm here. You're here because your family needed help. And you offered it, or demanded it." His silence was answer enough. Her heart pounded. "Tell me the truth. Did you bring me here because of her?" He faced her again. His eyes were weary, resigned. "Your mother saved my life once. I promised to look after her family. When your father wrote to me, I could not refuse. So I was sent here to repay an old debt." "No," he said quickly. "You were sent here because I owed her, not you. But I pay the price." He looked pained. "It was never meant as punishment." "Then what was it?" He didn't answer. The rain beat harder on the windows. She turned toward the door. "You should have told me. Inés." But she was already gone. She went to her room, closed the door, and leaned against it. Her reflection in the small mirror looked strange, older somehow. The truth had changed everything. Outside, the mansion fell silent again. Somewhere above, she heard the faint echo of the Count's footsteps pacing. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the letters lying open beside the candle. The ink looked darker in the flickering light. Her mother's name blurred before her eyes. A gust of wind blew the candle out, leaving her in darkness. From the corridor came a single sound, slow steps approaching her door. The door opened slowly. The Count stood there, the candlelight behind him casting his face in gold and shadow. Inés rose at once, clutching the letters in her hands. "You shouldn't come here," she said. "I needed to," he replied. "You left before I could explain." "There is nothing left to explain, my lord. I understand perfectly. You bought me as part of a promise you once made. That's not what I meant when I sent for you." "Then what did you mean?" He hesitated. "You deserve the truth. May I come in?" She stepped aside. The room was small, barely enough for the two of them. He closed the door and looked at the candle still burning on her table. "I knew your mother," he began, "before I was the man I am now. She worked here when the estate belonged to my father. I was young, foolish, and she was kind to me in a way no one else was. When she left to marry your father, I wished her well. Years later, when I heard of her death, I wrote to him, promising that if ever his family needed help, my door would remain open." Inés looked down at the letters. "And when he asked, you remembered your promise?" "I did, but when you arrived, I saw her face again, in yours. It shook me more than I expected. I thought bringing you here would ease my guilt, repay a debt I could never pay. But I was wrong. It only reminded me of everything I'd lost. Was she the reason for your wife's unhappiness?" she asked quietly. His eyes widened slightly. "Who told you that?" "No one had to. I saw it in the way you look at the past, as if it still punishes you." He turned away, his voice low. "My wife died believing I still loved another. She was not wrong, not entirely. I thought time had buried that part of me. But when you came, the resemblance, it woke things better left asleep." Inés's throat tightened. "Then I was never meant to be myself. Only a reminder." "No," he said firmly. "That's what I feared at first. But you're not her, Inés. You're nothing like her. You're stronger, quieter. You listen when others turn away. You make this house breathe again." The words fell softly between them. She felt her voice shake. "You shouldn't say that." "I must, because I can't keep pretending I feel nothing. You've brought light into a place I thought was beyond it." Inés stepped back. "You speak of gratitude, not affection." He shook his head. "Gratitude fades. What I feel does not." Silence filled the small room. The candle crackled, its flame trembling. "My lord," she said finally, "I cannot be part of your repentance." He met her eyes. "This isn't repentance. It's the first truth I've spoken in years." She wanted to believe him, yet everything inside her resisted. "You owe me honesty, not devotion." "I owe you both," he said. "But I know you cannot trust me now." He turned toward the door. "Still, you should know. Tomorrow I'll set you free. Your wages, your papers, Everything your family is owed. You can go wherever you wish." She stared at him, unsure whether to thank or resent him. "You mean to send me away?" "Yes, because it's the only way to do right by you." He left without another word. Inés sat down slowly. The candle burned lower, its wax spilling across the table. She unfolded the letters one last time, reading her father's uneven handwriting until the words blurred again. When morning came, she expected to feel relief, but there was only emptiness. She spent the day helping in the kitchen, trying to avoid the Count. Every step, every chore felt mechanical. The servant spoke of his order to prepare documents for her departure. That evening, she found him in the library, standing near the window. He looked as though he hadn't slept. Papers lay spread on the desk. "You've come to say goodbye?" he asked. "If I must." He sighed. "You mustn't think of this as punishment. I'm giving you back your life. My life was never truly mine, my lord. You took me from my home, but what was left there for me? Hunger? Debt? You may have bought my service, but you also gave me purpose." His voice softened. "Then stay if you wish, but not as a servant." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "As someone free, someone who chooses to remain." Her heart raced. "And what would that make me?" "Whatever you decide," he said. "If you stay, it will be because you wish it, not because of a debt, not because of guilt." She shook her head. "Freedom cannot be offered. It must be earned." "You've already earned it," he said quietly. "You've given me peace. I didn't mean to. Then forgive me if I wanted it too much." He moved closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "I see now that I was never saving you, Inés. You were saving me." She felt the weight of his gaze, the sadness behind it. "You speak as if I've already forgiven you. Have you not?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Part of me wishes to leave and never return. Another part can't bear the thought of it. Then let that part decide. I need time," she whispered. He nodded. "Time then. Take it." He turned back to the desk, gathering the papers. His movements were calm, deliberate, but his hands trembled slightly. She watched him, realizing that for all his wealth and power, he was a man more imprisoned than she had ever been. That night she walked through the gardens. The moonlight touched the old fountain, filling its dry bowl with silver light. She remembered his words. "You were saving me." The phrase followed her like a soft echo. The next morning, she awoke with a decision forming quietly inside her. She went to the chapel where few ever ventured. The small space smelled of candle wax and stone. A single beam of light cut through the dust, falling on the altar. Father Tomas, the village priest, had come to visit that day, and she found him kneeling there. He looked up when she entered. "My child," he said gently, "the Count told me of his plans for you. You seem troubled." "I don't know what is right," she confessed. "I came here unwillingly, yet I found something I can't name." "Perhaps it is mercy," the priest said, "for him and for you." She shook her head. "It feels like love, but love built on guilt cannot stand." He smiled faintly, then let it stand on forgiveness instead. His words settled in her heart. Later, when she left the chapel, she found the Count waiting by the gate. He had been watching the sky. "You went to see Father Tomas," he said. "I did. And what did he tell you?" "That forgiveness can heal what guilt cannot." He looked at her, the faintest trace of hope in his eyes. "Then will you forgive me?" "I already have," she said. For a long time neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of earth after rain. "I would still have you free," he said finally, "even if forgiveness keeps you near." She smiled faintly. "Freedom means choice, my lord, and I have chosen not to hate you." He breathed deeply, as though her words had lifted a weight from his chest. From that day on, the tone of the house changed. The servants sensed it. The silence that had once filled the halls turned gentle instead of heavy. The Count walked among them, speaking kindly, listening to their troubles. Inés continued her duties, but not out of obligation. She worked because she wanted to see the place alive again. Each morning the Count joined her in the gardens. Together they tended the vines, pruning, watering, rebuilding. One afternoon he said, "This land was dying until you came. It only needed care," she answered. So did I. They shared a quiet smile. Days grew longer, warmer. When the vineyards began to bloom again, Inés realized she no longer feared the house or its memories. She belonged to its peace now, not its sorrow. Yet something still lingered unsaid. One evening, while closing the shutters in the hall, she found the Count standing before the large mirror near the staircase. He seemed deep in thought. "Does the past still trouble you?" she asked. He nodded. "It whispers, but softly now. I think it's learning to let me go." "Then let it," she said. "The dead do not need our chains." He looked at her reflection beside his own. "And what of the living? They need courage." He turned to her fully. "You have more of that than I do. I only learned it from watching you." He smiled. "Then I owe you more than I can repay." "No, my lord. We owe each other nothing now." Her words seemed to settle him. That night, as she prepared for rest, she heard soft music echoing through the hall, the old piano in the west wing, untouched for years. She followed the sound and found the Count seated before it, his hands uncertain on the keys. "I didn't know you played," she said. "I haven't in a long time." He gestured toward the empty space beside him. "Would you sit?" She did. The melody faltered, then steadied again. "She loved this piece," he murmured. "Then let it belong to peace now," Inés said. When he finished, the silence that followed was calm, almost sacred. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw no ghosts, only gratitude. "Inés," he said quietly, "I don't ask you to love me, only to believe that I love you." She didn't answer. Her eyes met his, steady and clear. "Believe it," he whispered again. She reached out and touched his hand. "I believe." The clock in the corridor struck midnight. The last note of the piano faded into stillness. For the first time in years, the mansion slept without sorrow. Outside, the sky began to lighten, a pale promise of morning. Spring came early that year. The vineyards of Montemor began to bud with the first green shoots, and the earth seemed to breathe again. Every morning the servants worked among the rows while birds filled the sky. Inés walked through the garden carrying a basket of cut flowers, her dress brushing the wet grass. She had never known the estate so full of sound and life. The Count joined her near the old fountain. His coat was open, his hands bare of gloves. "You've made this place alive again," he said. "You exaggerate, my lord. The land simply needed patience." "And you?" She smiled faintly. "I needed forgiveness." He looked at her for a long time. "You found it." "Yes. In you. In myself." They began walking toward the chapel. Along the way, the Count stopped to watch the workers tending the vines. "They say the harvest will be good this year," he said. "The first in many seasons. It feels like a new beginning." He nodded. "Would you stay to see it?" She turned to him. "You said I was free to go." "I did. But freedom also means the right to stay." Her voice softened. "Do you truly wish me here?" "I wish you everywhere I must go," he said simply. Her breath caught. "You shouldn't speak like that. I've hidden my feelings long enough. The house knows, the servants whisper, and still you walk beside me every morning. Tell me, Inés, why do you stay?" "Because this is where I learned to live again," she said. "Because you are not the man the world believes you to be." He smiled, a quiet, almost disbelieving smile. "What kind of man am I then?" "One who has suffered and still chooses kindness." He took a slow breath, as if her words steadied him. "I want to ask something of you, but only if you can answer with your heart." "What is it?" He hesitated, then spoke softly. "Stay as my equal, as my wife." Inés stood still. For a moment she thought she had misheard him. "You can't mean that." "I mean every word." "My lord, call me Afonso," he said. She stared at him, her pulse racing. "A marriage between us would cause talk. The world would not understand. The world has never given me peace. I no longer owe it anything. What I owe is to the woman who gave me back my life." Her voice trembled. "Do you love me? Or do you love what I remind you of?" He reached for her hand. "You have nothing of the past in you. You are the only future I can see." The weight of his sincerity left her speechless. The garden around them seemed to fade until only their voices remained. "I don't know if I'm ready for such a life," she said at last. "Neither was I," he answered. "But love doesn't wait for readiness. It asks for courage." She looked down at their joined hands, then slowly lifted her gaze. "Then you already know my answer." He searched her eyes. "Say it." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll stay." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and drew her into his arms. For the first time in years, he smiled without restraint. They stood that way for a long while, neither speaking. The bells from the chapel rang softly in the wind, and the vines rustled as if applauding. The wedding took place a few weeks later, small and quiet. Father Thomas came from the village to bless the union. The servants filled the chapel benches, their faces bright with surprise and joy. Inés wore a simple gown of white linen, and the Count, Afonso, stood beside her, his eyes never leaving hers. When the priest asked for their vows, Afonso's voice was clear. "Before this house, before God, and before the woman who saved my soul, I promise to cherish her above all else." Inés's reply came soft but steady. "Before all who see and those unseen, I promise to walk beside him, not behind." When the ceremony ended, the bells rang louder. Laughter broke through the halls for the first time in years. The servants decorated the tables with flowers from the garden, and the smell of bread and sweet wine filled the air. Later, as the evening cooled, Afonso led Inés to the balcony overlooking the vineyards. The sun was setting, turning the land gold. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "The wind?" "No. Life returning." She smiled. It never truly left. It was only waiting. He touched her cheek gently. "Do you regret staying?" "Not for a heartbeat." He drew her close, his forehead against hers. "When I first saw you, I thought fate was cruel. Now I see it was mercy in disguise." "You still believe in mercy?" "I do, because you taught me how." They fell into silence, watching the last light fade behind the hills. When night came, music rose from the courtyard, violins, flutes, a drum beating softly. The servants danced, calling for their lord and lady to join them. Afonso extended his hand. "May I?" Inés laughed. "I've never danced in such company." "Then tonight will be your first." They stepped into the courtyard. The servants cheered. Afonso guided her through the steps, slow and graceful, his hand firm at her waist. Her laughter mixed with the music. Around them, candles flickered like stars. "You dance as if you've waited for this all your life," she said. "Perhaps I have." When the music ended, he didn't let go of her hand. He led her through the garden to the old fountain where they had first spoken months before. Water now flowed through it again, glimmering under the moonlight. "You fixed it," she said. "We fixed it," he replied. "Together." The sound of water filled the quiet. He turned to her. "This place once reminded me of loss. Now it reminds me of beginnings." She touched his arm. "Every wound can bloom again if tended with care. You speak like a poet." "I speak like a woman who finally feels safe," he smiled. "Then this is home." She nodded. "Home." They walked back toward the house, the windows glowing with warm light. In the doorway he paused. "Do you remember the night you arrived? You looked out that window, and I stood watching from the balcony. I remember. I was afraid." "So was I," he admitted. "Afraid of what I saw. And what did you see?" "Hope," he said simply. She felt tears rise, but held them back. "You're not the man I met that night." "No," he said. "You changed me." She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. "And you taught me that even the broken can be kind." He kissed her forehead. "If I ever forget, remind me." "You'll never forget." In the days that followed, they worked side by side to restore the estate. The workers returned from nearby villages, new vines were planted, and laughter echoed from the kitchens to the fields. The people began to call Inés the Lady of the Vines. She treated everyone with the same quiet dignity she had known as a servant. One morning, as they walked through the vineyards, she stopped to watch the sunrise over the hills. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if my father had never sent me here?" she asked. Afonso thought for a moment. "I'd still be living among ghosts. You'd still be dreaming of a life beyond the fields. We'd both be waiting for something we couldn't name. Then perhaps we were meant to find each other in loss. Or in grace, he said. She smiled. Grace, then. He bent and kissed her gently. Grace, he repeated against her lips. That summer the harvest arrived, abundant and sweet. The villagers came to help and the estate filled with songs. Inés and Afonso worked beside them, their hands stained with grape juice, their faces bright from the sun. At dusk, they sat beneath the olive trees, watching the workers carry the last baskets to the press. Afonso said quietly, "Do you remember the first day I saw you in the fields? You carried water as if it weighed nothing. And you carried sorrow as if it weighed everything," she answered. He laughed softly. "You've a sharp tongue for a countess. I was a farm girl first, and that's exactly why I love you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Say it again. I love you," he whispered. The sound settled between them, simple and final. That night the whole estate celebrated the harvest. Torches lined the courtyard, music echoed, and the scent of grapes and bread filled the air. Inés wore a garland of vines in her hair. Afonso lifted a cup of new wine and spoke to those gathered. "This land was once barren," he said. "Now it bears fruit again, as do our hearts. Let this house stand not for sorrow, but for renewal." Cheers rose around them. Inés's eyes shone with quiet pride. When the music began again, Afonso led her away from the crowd to the upper balcony. The night was clear, the stars sharp above the hills. "I thought I'd lost the right to happiness," he said. "But it waited for me in your hands. You make happiness sound fragile." "It is," he said. "That's why it must be guarded." "Then we'll guard it together." He looked at her, his voice low. "I still wake sometimes thinking this is a dream. Then let it be one we never end." He smiled, drawing her close. "When I look at you, I see everything I was meant to find." "And what do you see?" "Home," he said again. The night breeze lifted her hair. Below them, laughter drifted from the courtyard, the sound of a world reborn. She rested her hand against his cheek. "Do you remember when you told me silence keeps better company than words?" He nodded. "I remember. You were wrong. What keeps better company then?" "Love," she said. He kissed her. The vineyard bells rang in the distance, the final note of the harvest feast rising into the night. The mansion that had once been a place of shadows now glowed with light. And in the center of it, they stood together, no longer master and servant, but two souls who had chosen each other freely. And as dawn began to touch the sky, Afonso whispered her name like a prayer, and Inés answered with a quiet laugh that promised a lifetime. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.